I learned the hard way. You don't have to. Let's crack some passwords. So the elevator pitch. Goal of this talk is for all of you to be able to learn this here and then go back to your organizations and do it. I saw way too much blue stuff where it didn't give me everything I needed to know to actually be able to do an audit. You find tools, and they say, this is how you dump the hashes off the domain controller. Here's the tool you use to decrypt them. And then use Hashcut to crack it. And then, oh, here's the beautiful report we generate. Okay, that's fine. The hard part was the cracking it. That was the hard part. That's the thing I actually need a lot of knowledge about. So I had to teach myself how to do this. Now you don't have to. Who am I? I'm Benjamin Tice. I nerd pretty hard. At home, I'm a recovering distro hopper. I've used just about everything. I haven't technically used Gentoo, but I count Sabian. And my other gaming rig is a Raspberry Pi. I brought the Raspberry Pi to the hotel room. I was very excited to see that I could actually plug it into the TV, and then I grabbed it into my bag and found I forgot a controller. Really, really sad. At work, I am a full stack, full scope defense for one branch of a company. I am a little weird in that I am wearing every hat for an entire security program, but at a small enough scale where it's kind of doable for a single person, kind of. I also have really been enjoying doing threat hunting recently. I'm also the internal red team, so does that make me a one-person purple team? Maybe? My approach to defense, just very, very briefly, we as defenders have the home field advantage. Why aren't we using it? Like I'm very, very home alone about this. Somebody else is gonna come into my environment, and that's where the battle's gonna be fought. Let me change the environment to gain advantage there. So why do we care? The other thing about me being kind of full scope is, yes, the lion's share of this talk is going to be technical, but it's going to be in context of your strategy for achieving a goal, and we're going to talk about what is that goal. Our goal is to frustrate attackers. It is to take things away from them. It is to lengthen the amount of time it takes to complete certain attacks. If you make it take longer, that's more time for us to respond, shut things down. A better chance I actually do shut it down before they reach their end goal. Early on in the attacker's lifecycle, initial access, password spraying. If you have anything connected to Active Directory that is available outside from the internet, say Outlook web app, anything Exchange related, they can password spray. Do a little research, get a list of usernames, and guess the same weak password. Right now it would be fall 2019 bang against every account they've identified. They just need one. Dump the global address list. They now have every username in your entire org. Do a second password spray against all of them. You can start pillaging through email looking for VPN credentials, certificates, all that stuff. If you find VPN certs, boom, you're in. Your password policy, the fact that you let somebody in your org have fall 2019 bang as a password, just got attackers from outside to in. Once they're inside, there are lots of ways for attackers to do lateral movement. And a lot of them don't require them cracking anything. But if the attacker can crack things, that means they get to do it stealthier. You're going to be setting off more alarms if you just do pass the hash than if you crack that hash and use the legitimate credentials over a legitimate protocol. So we're not completely cutting down lateral movement, but we can make it harder and take away the thing they'd rather be doing. As well as, like, server roasting is a thing that you can do. It's part of the protocol. There's no way you can patch it out. But what they're doing is asking for a hash for a service account. Before they can use that, they have to crack it. By auditing, we're going to make sure we don't have any super duper weak service accounts in our environment. Collection, what if what the attacker is after is behind a web login portal? It is backed by AD, but they can't directly pass the hash into that thing. Then they need to crack the credential. So depending on what your crown jewels are, depending on what the attacker's after, they may need to crack a credential to get the stuff they're looking for. And there are also a few possibilities for exfil. If you're really locked down, you don't have too many things you're letting out, you're probably letting your own stuff out, so like Exchange. They can use that valid credential, just shove stuff into drafts, use those credentials to log in and pull it out. At that point, you've seen the same type of traffic from your legitimate server with a legitimate account. That's pretty stealthy. And then also, if you have cloud stuff loud through, you may or may not, but if you do, hey, I've cracked this credential. I see that this organization is using Dropbox or whatever. Let me see if any of these people are using the same username and that same password in Dropbox. Oh, look, they are. Now it's traffic you've explicitly allowed through with an account from your organization. So these are all the things we would like attackers to not be doing. How do we do that? So now we know why we would care about password security. How are we going to improve it? There are 4 main areas I've identified that people use to do this. Some people focus on one. I'm going to say probably most of them are worth your time to look at. First thing is training and tools. The next one is changing your policy. This is really important. Auditing is going to be most of what we're talking about. And then password filtering is a newer technique that's shown up in use. Training and tools. Ultimately, when it comes to your users, password security is about changing their behavior. You want them to pick strong passwords. To change somebody's behavior, you need 3 things. They need to know their behavior needs to change. They need to have the knowledge required to change that behavior and do the new behavior. They need to have the tool, as well as tools will also make that easier. And they need to have the motivation to do it. Motivation is hard. Making them know that it's their job to have good passwords, that's straightforward. Include it in your employee onboarding. Hey, we care about security here. You are required to have a secure password. These are our policies. You're required to do this. Training them is just do a yearly training, have an onboarding training, whatever you need to do, so that they know how to make strong passwords. They know your recommended method for generating them. You give them tools to help generate it, and you give them a password vault installed by default on their workstation, and you teach them to use it. That one's important because it does affect motivation, not directly, but indirectly. Eventually, they will figure out that since they have a password vault, that means they only need to remember 2 passwords, the one to log into their machine, the one to unlock the vault. All of the other passwords they're storing in that vault are now going to be super secure because they don't have to remember them. They can just keep them in the vault. You just won as far as all of those passwords are concerned. And no longer having passwords under sticky notes. No longer having, like, you all know that one spreadsheet in your organization that's all of the accounts and all of the passwords for them. Like, you know where it is. You know which team is using it. It might be yours. Deploying a password vault fixes that. Makes less plain text credentials for attackers to pillage. By pulling down the level of effort below people's motivation, you change their behavior. So I can't force somebody to be motivated, but I can make it easier for them to do the right thing, to do the secure thing I want them to do. So, password policies. This is one of the biggest screw-ups in terms of security. If you are using 8-character minimum with a bunch of complexity and 90-day rotation, you are in the worst case scenario because absolutely no part of that is securing you, and part of it is making it's grinding down your users to the point where they have no energy left to make a good password. 8 characters is crackable in minutes on a pro rig. If we're not talking a pro rig, I'm going to show you how to get through the majority of them in 6 days on a $150 GPU. So we need to push longer. If you're talking a pro rig, anything shorter than 12 is a no-go. Because right now, 10 is crackable in, I think, a couple weeks. 11 is going to take a few years, but that's going to change next year when the next GPU comes out, right? So 12 is the absolute minimum, and for years I've never heard anybody who knew what they were talking about that said anything less than 12. So when it comes to password policies, it really is the length that counts. That took longer than it should have. All right. Same thing applies to your rotation time. I realize a lot of people, particularly higher up in your org, are going to be really nervous if you try to go for no max password time. That's fine. You don't need to go there, but you do need to let off the pressure. It needs to be significantly longer than 90 days. I'm going to recommend pushing up to a year. That should be a good balance point between, yes, you do still have a maximum time a password will live, period. It's a hard limit, but when somebody makes a password, they know unless it gets cracked by your audit, they get to keep it for a whole year. Because I'm recommending you do audits quarterly, this means that you're changing my password always change from 90 days into my password will have to change every 90 days unless I make a strong password. Then I get to keep it for a year. And this is reframing their motivation and gives you an opportunity to change the behavior of more people. The 90-day password thing is why password spraying is even possible. Because as you force people to rotate passwords, they get lazier and lazier and lazier until they find the low energy point for passwords. Password you literally don't even have to remember. What year is it? What season is it? Throw a bang on the end, done. I didn't even have to remember my password. I can just generate it from information I have floating around. So what you manage to achieve in terms of minimum password length will influence your cracking strategy when you're auditing. If you are stuck at 8 characters, if you're getting pushback for changing it to something longer, your focus is going to be on cracking those shorter passwords to demonstrate, hey, I cracked all these passwords. We need this to be longer. If you've been successful in pushing up to 12 or longer, you're going to have a different thing, and that's going to be, all right, what is an attacker who knows that going to do? How do I replicate that? How do I crack the same passwords an actual attacker is going to? Password auditing is the focus of this talk. Pretty simple. Dump hashes, crack them. Anybody that you crack their password, you're using the same technique an attacker would. If you can crack it, a real attacker would have been able to crack it too. That person needs to rotate their password. Look at what they did. Just a little bit of information about like, hey, I saw you used a song lyric as your password. I realize it's long enough, but you use something that's guessable. Use something somebody can just download and manipulate a little bit and guess it. You need to have it be random. Or, hey, this is your favorite Bible verse. Come on. I don't recommend like a 3-strike kind of thing or any kind of real punishment for this. Ideally, you're going to be way too successful for that to be a thing. If for many audits in a row, somebody is failing every single one, then on a case-by-case basis, maybe take some remedial action, but I wouldn't go straight for like, oh, it's 3 strikes and you get some kind of punishment. I just recommend education and changing it. Password filtering is a little bit newer. Is recommended by the new NIST standard. At creation time, do not allow known compromised passwords. I don't actually think that's possible, given the fact that the list of known compromised passwords I'm going to recommend you use is like 20 gigs. I don't see your domain controller searching through 20 gigs of text for an exact match and not timing out the password creation process, but we can try. It's never going to cover auditing. It's never going to replace auditing. They're complementary. They don't replace each other. Some of the software I've seen out there is soft match, where you can say, listen, no password will be accepted if it is more than 80% similar to this list of passwords. I think that's really good because that is starting to cover some of the wiggle room that you're covering with auditing. Some of them are must not contain. That would be really great for like, hey, I've cracked a bunch of passwords. I see that everybody's using the company name. Let's just not let people use the company name. And then some of these also come with really advanced password tools. Some of them come with like strength meters and other things. There's good stuff to be had here. Caveat. Right now, until Microsoft supports this natively in Active Directory, you're going to have to grab a DLL and stick it onto the domain controller. If that third-party DLL crashes, it will crash LSAS on the domain controller. So if you go to your IT team and say, hey, we want to do that, and they go, no. There's a reason they're telling you no. It's because there's a lot of risk there. Crashes, it goes down. If they upgrade and the DLL is no longer compatible with the new version, you're going to have problems, and it's a bad day for everybody. I'm pretty pro open source, but this is a case where I would look carefully into the project to make sure it's well maintained before deploying it, period. And where you might actually want to go for a commercial solution that has some support behind it. Just look before you jump. I'm going to talk about different maturity levels in terms of password cracking. You can pick what's right for your org. I think basically every organization I can think of on the planet should at least be at the 1-hour level, okay? Because it is very, very little additional effort. Once you already have dumped the hashes, you check them against known compromised ones. That is the 5-minute audit. Just sit there and guess the obvious things. Just give a little bit of coverage. See what you can do in 1 hour. 1 hour real time. Not that much. I think everybody should be there, but if you want to do more than that, you can. You pick where you want to be on the security level. 5-minute audit, we're just checking whether or not the hash is known compromised. Perfect exact match. 1 hour, we're going to go through high probability passwords with some good password rules, and that's about all we're going to do. If you've got a weekend, on Friday you do the 1 hour audit, and then you set a bunch of things to leave running over the weekend. let them run over the weekend, and then you check them on Monday. Then now you've got some cracked passwords. You're going to find related passwords. You're just going to take that list of cracked passwords, and you're going to shove it through some more stuff, crack related passwords. Continuous auditing, what I mean by that is just after you're done with that process, leave it running until the next audit. You will need a dedicated box for this. This is where you might want to consider paying a little bit of money or a little bit of nicer GPU if you want to be at that level of maturity. Not, don't worry about it. You pick where you want to exist on this. When you leave that running, it's going to crack a few hashes. You then add those to your list. You check, make sure those things are still active. You've cracked more stuff. You've gotten more content. All right, what are we going to need to do this? Hardware. I'm recommending an NVIDIA GPU because it's good compatibility, and I'm recommending you stick with Windows. The Linux guy is telling you to stick with Windows. Okay? You're pretty much guaranteed it's going to install, and any newer NVIDIA driver is going to give you OpenCL, which is the thing that lets you do random calculations on hardware, what lets you do work on a GPU. Just if you've never built a PC before, you're going to need to make sure you have enough power. This is only really relevant if you're doing a beefier card, and you're going to need to make sure it has a slot open, which it almost certainly will. Make sure the card also physically fits into it. All of the cracking times I'm going to give you are either, unless otherwise specified, or for a GTX 1050. That's about a $150 card. I found one laying around where I work. So scrounge around, see what you can find. You can use whatever you can find. You can use multiple. If you have a couple, like I could have scrounged a couple of 740s and used both of those. It wouldn't have got me to the same place, but see what you can scrounge, see what you can buy, figure out, like, say, hey, we're doing this. What's our budget? Can I spend this much money? Can I spend this much money? And then go buy that. But you can do this without spending any upfront money. Cracking software, Hashcut. This is going to be the thing we use to crack the hashes. You're going to see a lot of Hashcut. Prince Processor is a tool that will do combinations of words. So if I wanted to do every possible combination of 5 words between 8 characters and 12 characters, Prince will let me do that. Pack is something that's optional. This will analyze existing passwords and generate you masks. This is how you get something that you know is statistically good. What percentage of somebody's passwords can I crack in 10 minutes? Pack, tell me, how many can I crack in 10 minutes? Well, you can crack these 3 masks in 10 minutes. Great, give me those 3 masks. This is how you do actual brute force. We'll talk more about that, but nobody does brute force. Everybody uses masks. How do I know I'm tracking the right mask? You have a tool that generates you the statistically best one. ntsd.dit is the file on the domain controller that actually contains the hashes. It's encrypted. Of course, it's Microsoft, so anybody want to guess where the decryption key is? Right next to it in the registry. Same command that dumps this also dumps that registry hive. But you will need a tool to decrypt it. Cracked is going to show up 3 times in this list. One of the things it will do is decrypt that. You can also use and packet. And if you want to go PowerShell, you have DSI internal. Hash comparison tool. That 5-minute audit, we're taking a list of compromised hashes, and we're taking a list of our internal hashes, and I'm going to compare them. These are tools that'll do it. The 5-minute password audit does that offline. You just download both files. Like you have your file and you download another one, you just compare. Completely offline, completely private. Cracked it will do anonymity to a cloud service to check it. If you don't know what that means, don't do that. If you don't understand what data that is leaking about your environment, don't do that. I'm going to recommend you just do the offline version because A, you're guaranteed to be allowed. Depending on your company, you may not be allowed to use a cloud service that way for something like your passwords. And literally takes less than 5 minutes. It's not hard. You can download something. You're going to have to download something later anyway. Auditing tools is completely optional. You can by hand just compare this hash, human hash, this hash and password. They line up. Okay, I know this person was compromised with this password. You can do that by hand. If you don't want to do that by hand, Cracked it and DPAT will cover that. That's the main password audit tool. And then you will need a BitTorrent client for this. If you have never torrented anything before, not scary, it is not illegal, and transmission is one that I can give a thumbs up to. But if you've torrented something before, use whatever your favorite. Word lists. These are our lists of candidate passwords. In fact, every word list we're going to use here is candidate passwords except for Google's list of top English words. The real passwords one, probable passwords, is statistically significant password. They have a copy of my slides, so I don't know how BSides hands them out. And I'm also going to put these on GitHub. I apologize for not doing that before the talk, but I didn't have the opportunity. Probable word list is statistically significant. Their lowest threshold is that 5 different dumps had the password in it. That's their lowest threshold. The most probable ones were far, far more than that. So it is a giant list of the most statistically significant passwords all the way to ones that were only 5 different people across 5 different dumps. Pick that. This is your biggest bang for your buck word list. Passphrase word list, if we are pushing for 12 plus characters, we're going to start using passphrases. In my case, I'm training them to use passphrases. Passphrase word list contains the lazy passphrases. Song lyrics, Wikipedia, quotes, all that stuff. Clone passwords into ordered by count. That's actually our hash list we're going to use for the 5-minute audit. Not technically a word list, but I didn't know where else to put it. Trackstation, Weak Pass, and Breach Compilation are all just really, really big lists. They're optional, we can use them later. Checklist contains all kinds of useful things. It includes your standard, everybody talks about RockU. You do RockU in a tutorial for password cracking, you don't know where to grab a copy, there's a place you can grab a copy. And then Google's top 10,000 words is the only list of actual words in our list of word lists. Words. Rules. Rules are things that manipulate an input password. In my Who Am I do a different Who Am I joke every single time. This one, it's a LeetSpeak Who Am I. How do I take Who Am I and turn it into the LeetSpeak version? Well, there's a rule for that. Rules just munge and mangle your input passwords. They're a multiplier for your guesses. If you're just reading in a word list, your GPU is not fully utilized. Throwing in a rule lets you fully utilize it. The only one I'm going to say is required is one rule to rule them all. It is statistically your best bang for your buck in terms of rules. The other rule I'm going to say is required is going to come with Hashcut. Optional, probable rules, the NSA rule set, and then notice probable word list is here again. They did a statistical analysis of it and made a bunch of rules. Cool. These are all optional. Grab them if you want to. Tracking techniques. First one and the biggest one we're going to do. Take a word list, throw a rule on it, run it. Put word lists are going to be plain, or they might have some stuff there. You're going to have rules that are going to swap characters out, such as LeetSpeakifying. You're going to have rules that are going to append things at the end, just to cover random things at the end. Or they could be appending a specific thing, like a date to the end. Rules are really, really powerful. This is the first thing that any professional cracking company is going to do. This is the first thing your red team is going to do, is they have their preferred word list, their preferred set of rules, and they're going to run the word list. Combinator. Combinator is how you do, on the left, word list on the right, do every possible combination. This is how you do a 2D, word. But Hashcut, with its Combinator attack, will only do 2. Some other limitations. It says you're supposed to be able to apply a rule to each list before you go in. I could only get it to work on the right-hand side. And you're limited to only 2 words deep. Prince fixes this. Prince will do any combination up to a length that you want. You can say, give me everything from 5 words, and make sure you're only giving me outputs that are between 8 and 12 characters. You do that. And if you don't cap it, it'll run forever. Going forever. It is being piped into Hashcut. This is good things and it has bad things. The good thing is, anything Hashcut can do, you can do. You can do a hybrid attack, you can do rules I was just talking about. Downside, the pipe seems to cause weird performance issues. I can never get it to actually do full utilization. So if we have any password cracking gurus in the house that want to tell me what's up with that, I would love to know. Fingerprint. This is what we're actually going to do with Combinator and Prince. Once I've cracked a bunch of passwords, how do I get more passwords out of them? How do I turn my small list of passwords into a bigger list of passwords? Related password attacks. Fingerprints takes your, I'm going to call it a golden dictionary. Points to anybody who knows why I call it a golden dictionary. Is all of the passwords you've already cracked. You're going to take that, you're going to push it through a tool called Expander that will rotate through the different character combinations and will chop it into different lengths. So you're going to do every combination of those lengths. For a Combinator, you're going to get every combination of lengths. Words. Prince can do whatever you want. This is a great thing to do once you already have some passwords to find more, because an attacker is going to do this. An attacker is going to find related passwords. Somebody had an old password, they change it minorly. How you find their new password. Masks are what people are actually doing when they talk about pick a pattern. You only crack things within that pattern. For example, for digit pin, we're only going to do things of exactly length 4, and we're going to do every digit. Examples on there. If I wanted to crack password 1 or password 2, more secure, we're going to do lowercase for 8 characters and then 1 digit. You can generate these with hack to the most statistically significant one on analyzing a list of cracked passwords. That's what we're going to take advantage of here to be able to say, all right, what do I want to do if I want to have good coverage of 8 characters? Okay, pack, give me everything that's statistically. This will let you get longer than brute force. So us on our scrounged or budget cracking rig are not going to be able to brute force all of 8 characters, but we can get good coverage of the patterns people actually use by using this technique. And if you want to push longer than that, you can. You're just not going to be able to do as many patterns. So let's get into how we actually do this. Step 1 is to grab and decrypt the hashes. NTDS kill, if you just run it, it'll drop you into a shell and you can type these commands manually. If you want to do it all in one line, you can put the shell inputs onto it. This is going to give you ctemp as your output. What you just did is taking a backup of a lot of important stuff on the domain controller. Important to us, it includes the file that has the hashes in it, and it includes system hive, which has the encryption key. Extract it. As I mentioned, there are other tools you can do this with. Give it the path to that system hive. Give it the path to it. It will decrypt it. Name hashes. 5-minute audit. Downloaded and unarchived our UMList. I import this. I know somebody would complain that the command didn't work if I didn't setting the execution policy. We're going to import it. We're going to run it. It's going to give you a list of every account that matches a known publicly compromised hash. Tell you what the password is, but you know it's actually compromised out there somewhere. You know you have to spend a little bit more time on this. This will all complete within an hour. Most of these are like 2 to 5 minutes. Hashcut.exe, tool we're using. -O, optimize. This makes it run like 10 times faster. Downside, you can't do anything over 27 characters. The vast majority of our things, that's a trade-off we're willing to make. M is the type of hash. In this case, it's a plain NTLM hash, so that's 1000 for the code for it. You can get Hashcut to tell you this list. Your pod file is your output hashes. This is where it's saving what it cracks. And then usernames, because we're doing username password format for our output, we're telling it, hey, this is in that format, and hashes.txt is all the things you just dumped. We're going to take in a word list. In this case, it's the biggest word list in our probable word list. Top 2. Everything in there is at least 5 people across 5 different public dumps use that password. And then we're going to run a rule on it. That 64 comes with Hashcut. It was at one point best rules. And it's still really solid. It's a lightweight rule. It's going to run pretty fast. Even though this is a big list, this is still going to complete within 5 minutes. Next, we're going to cover our passphrases. Hopefully, we're at 12 plus characters. Hopefully, people aren't using the same weak things that they're allowed 8. But that does mean they're going to start doing song lyrics and things like that. So we're going to run with this. That passphrases project comes with rules specifically intended for this. In particular, the rule 1 is going to do things with spaces. It's going to do intelligent placement of the spaces. And then we're going to run it with our other one. It's pretty fast. Now, again, we're using something out of the probable word lists, but we're taking a much smaller one. Instead of 2 billion, we're using 1.5 million, so it's a lot smaller. But we're going to run it with a much more expensive rule. I would say that one rule to rule them all is heavy. We're just going to generally categorize it, but it's still lighter than a lot of the heavy rules we use. This, because we're using a smaller list, will complete a small amount of time. This is going to give us a little more confidence that if there was something similar to, but not an exact match for one of these really, really probable, really weak passwords, so we still covered it. Now we get into masks. I asked Pack, hey Pack, can you give me as many 8-character masks as I can crack in 30 minutes? Here you go. This is as good of statistical coverage, as high a percentage of those patterns as you can cover in half an hour. And if I wasn't doing that, this probably would have been about a 15. Get into the weekend audit. We're willing to spend a little more time on this. We're going to complete our 1-hour audit, and then we're going to do up some stuff to leave running over the weekend. This can be on your workstation. It doesn't need to be dedicated because you're not using it. Notice there's going to be a W3 in our command lines. That's the workload. If you do that while you're using it, the desktop is going to lag. So for the previous one, I didn't tell you to do that. For this, we're leaving it running. We don't care if it's lagging. We're not using it. Increase the workload to 3. We're going to take one rule to rule them all. A big one, and then we're going to take big lists. We're going to run that big rule across our top 2 billion list, and then you can also download CrackStation, WeakFast, and Brief Compilation. Run it across those. Each one of these is going to take between most of them are around 5-6 hours. I think at least one of those takes closer to 12. But everything in the weekend audit will complete between Friday close of business and on Monday morning. Next, we're going to run 8 hours of 8-character passwords. That's the first half hour will be redundant, but we're going to get better coverage of those 8-character passwords. It's really important if you're not able to. And it's worth it to do even if you have pushed to 12 characters, because I guarantee you have a service account somewhere that is still 8 characters. You have old passwords that you're not using, that nobody's rotated, that are still going to be that. So it's still worth covering it. Next, we're going to take that passphrase list, and we're going to take that first passphrase rule, fills the spaces, and then we're going to run that through one rule to rule them all. Sometimes order matters in Hashcut, and sometimes it doesn't. You may have noticed that I swapped the order of where I was saying rule and where I was saying wordless, and it was fine. In this case, it actually matters. It will run one, and then it will run one rule to rule them all. So the order does matter here. I want to handle the spaces before I shove it through. Next up, I'm going to use the 64 rule twice. Remember, it's additive. It's not doing the same thing. It's now taking one password. It's multiplying that into a bunch of candidates by applying every rule. We're going to take that, and we're going to have it do the same thing again. This is more expensive, but it is worth running. Really making a super kind of. You know, at 3 of 3. Monday morning, you've come in, got a collection of hashes already cracked over the weekend. We're going to take all of those passwords we cracked, we're going to stick them into our golden dictionary, and then we're going to expand it. Yes, this is a useless use of cat. Don't give me a hard time about it. The other syntax is way harder to read. Take our golden dictionary, we're going to push it through Expander, sort it, and we're going to unique it because Expander doesn't take care of that. Put it into a file called golden dictionary expanded. And this is done in Expander on Windows. Yes, I have to use sort and unique. Then once I have that, we're just going to do the Combinator attack on it. We're going to take our left-hand side and our right-hand side as the golden dictionary, every possible combination of those inputs. It's going to complete in about a second, but you couldn't do it until you had passwords already cracked. Until you At this point, your weekend audit is done. You go and you say, all right, how many people need to rotate their passwords now? What if we want to get into continuous auditing? We're going to leave something running between our weekend audits. This is where you definitely need a dedicated machine. You're going to want to be running it and not have to worry about it. You can't use the desktop. You don't having to share space and time with it. And this is where, if you wanted to, a little bit of money on it, nicer GPU, figure out what your budget is. It all depends on what your goal is and what you're after. What are we getting out of doing this? Well, a professional isn't going to be using a scratch graphics card. They're going to be using a pro cracking rig or buying time in AWS or something like that. But if their rig is 4 times stronger than ours, we can cover with the same thing they would in a week, they'd use a month. If this is 12 times stronger, they need to use 3 months the entire time. That's still a little bit more confidence that we would have found internally on our own what we would get if we had an external auditor come. That's our goal here. If you're not interested in it, it's not the right fit for a different balance point. So how are we going to do this? start by covering all those 8 characters. If you have pushed up to 12, you only have to do this once, just to clean out your old legacy stuff, your old service accounts, your accounts. And then from that point, you then, right, what can I get within my audits for 9 characters? Learn how to use that. If you are still stuck at 8, really, really important, because you will crack a whole bunch of your 8-character passwords. This is every statistically significant, everything that was at least 1% of the population. Way faster than brute force. This is going to take about 6 days. On that 1050, it's going to take about 6 days to do. Next, we're going to do that fingerprint attack, but we're going to do it a little bit better. We're not going to limit ourselves to just length 2. We're going to use prints for it. So PP64 is prints processor. We're going to say max element count is 4. We're going to limit how long this is going to go. We're going to take in the golden dictionary, push it through prints. We're going to hand that over to Hashcut. Got optimize, workload. And then prints comes with its own rules. So we're going to put that rule on it. This is going to give you even more related passwords. Take time. It'll help you build confidence in found related ones. Next, something that's going to be doing something meaningful for the rest of our time. Prints is also a good choice here. We're going to use Google. We're going to run it through a rule. It's going to take, this may not complete by way too big of a word list for prints the way it's intended to be. So this may not complete before the next audit. But it'll tell you, hey, we've track counts of it. Well, now, just rinse, wash, and repeat. Do this every quarter. Whatever level of maturity you've decided to exist on, just do it quarterly. Track people's passwords, have them rotate it, and give person-specific advice on how to improve their password. Hey, I was able to crack it because you did this. That behavior. Password one. Optional upgrades for this. For those of you who are familiar with password cracking, you're probably wondering why I didn't talk about hybrid attacks. The reason I didn't talk about hybrid attacks is because I cracked exactly 0 passwords using this technique. Everything that I would have cracked using this technique, I had already cracked using it. Your mileage may vary. Go ahead and try it. The example I'm giving you here is using it on your golden dictionary, which is very fast and lets you use more expensive masks. Every input password is going to get every possible combination of that mask applied. So this is a really big multiplier. So using it, something that's like 4 long here, something you can only do on a small list like your golden. We're going to use a larger candidate list, use a smaller mask. With a character space on it. It can either prepend or append. It cannot do both. It's the right-hand side of this equation or it is the left-hand side of this equation. Weirdly, the order matters. Even though I'm telling it, hey, attack mode is 6, the append mode still cares that I'm putting the mask after the word list. And even though I'm telling it, hey, the attack mode is 7, the append, it still requires me to put that before the golden dictionary. Go figure. The other thing you can do is optimize your word list. You may have noticed that I'm telling you to run that command on 4 different big honkin' lists that probably have a bunch of dupes. The reason I'm telling you to do that is because I think the level of effort required to actually duplicate 60 gigs list is a little bit of a high ask for most people. If you want to go after it, the straightforward way to do it requires you to be able to fit that entire amount in RAM at one time. Have enough RAM. There are other ways to do it without that that are a lot more painful. There was a tool that would do this for you that was really easy. The problem is that real-world word lists have varying encodings, and Python does not like that. So a Python tool just has to just loop the file, basically fuzzing the Python decoder at that point. So tool was not happy. I was sad. It worked on small word lists, did not work on my big ones. The other thing you can do is Hashcut Sessions. Those command lines were absurd enough on the slides. In practice, anything I'm leaving running over the weekend or leaving running when I'm away from it, I'm going to name it with a specific session so that I can go check that session file to see if it completed. And I can see just by looking at the files on disk which sessions have started to run. And then also analyze your golden dictionary with fact. If you're successful with this, or particularly if you're in a large enough organization, you're going to be drowning in passwords. You get enough of them, you can analyze those with fact and go after what are the patterns my people, patterns that people. Okay. Okay. Question? Oh yeah, so Endpoint Protection is set up to alert on this. Microsoft in Windows has a number of things. You don't have anything that needs to be using it. Credential Guard Credential Guard will not play well with Docker on Windows, VMware, or anything else. If you need to run a hypervisor, it's not an option. Before they did Credential Guard, they had LSA protection. You can deploy that. And then there's stuff for this if you have Windows Defender there. Windows Defender has a lot of amazing stuff in it that you just have to go in either into the registry or into policy and turn on. It has something for this as well. I have all of that deployed that I can deployed to make it as hard as possible to do. So for that specific loop, looking into, is it possible to stop it at the network layer? No. Can I make it really, really difficult to get hashes out of memory? Yes. Is everybody on Windows 10 so that there's no plain text credentials? Yes. This is one little, puzzle piece in your whole jigsaw of your entire security. It's not the one thing you do. This is a thing that I think you will want to do. Other questions? I saw that hand first. My crazy setup was finding an unused desktop that had a powerful enough GPU and getting my boss to let me buy a 1070 Ti, plotting it in, installing Windows on it, and then running Hashcut. Crazy coolant. So I do have a crazy coolant. I used MSI Afterburner to change the fan curve because the fan curve wasn't keeping up and Hashcut was slowing down. That's the craziest thing I've done. So you could get into, can I overclock this? Can I do like mild coolant on it? Is that worth it for the majority of people in practice? I don't think so. If you want to get into this more seriously, you want to build a professional cracking rig, get into all that. But if you have no budget, but you can scrounge a GPU, you can do almost everything I'm talking about today. So the thing that AWS changes is that it's no longer about how much money is it for a GPU. It's about gigahashes per dollar. How many gigahashes do I want to spend on cracking this thing? How many is required to crack my goal? All right, how much time do I have to spend on that? Because you're not limited to one GPU. You can buy as many of those instances in AWS as you want. Just figure out how much money do I want to spend to crack this password. For me, that would be a no-no. I would put that kind of stuff in the cloud. For you, your rules may be different. If you want to go that route, you can do the calculation for, is this going to be cost-effective long-term to do this? Maybe it's not. That is absolutely a technique your actual attackers are going to be using. The lawyer in the back. I was going to call you out when you walked in. I decided that would be unprofessional. I would say that you're gonna forever hold on to your golden dictionary and add to it every password you've ever cracked. And that is where you're gonna go when you do, if you wanna implement password filtering. Your password filter lets you, what are the commonalities? Is it the company name? Is it everybody's favorite sports team? No password containing that is allowed. And then also, if I have a password that somebody's trying to use multiple times, throw it into the filter so that when they try to use that, they're not allowed. There's always going to be that one user that is going to try to mess up your day. That's where the hard controls of minimum length and the password filter come in. So the specific, the person behind that passphrase list also created a tool called Lyric Pass. That's how they're pulling song lyrics into that. What they're doing is looking up something, and they grabbed the top 100 artists, downloaded every song lyric for those top 100 artists, and then parsed it to every possible combination of words long. So my thing with telling people not to use song lyrics is if I can just go to the internet and download a list and lunge that list and it'll match your password. Password is too common, it's quotable, it's something somebody can crack and crack. It's something you can't do that technique. So that's the same problem with public quotes, that's the same thing with something like your favorite Bible verse. I threw into my list, I grabbed Project Gutenberg, a plain text version of the Bible, and I ran the two across it to that my population. So if it's a public quote, something somebody else can read, laying around on your hard drive. I come from a forensics background. You know how we crack people's passwords? Word list, every single word on the entire hard drive. So if it's anything like that, somebody's going to be able to guess it. What I always tell people is, listen, yes, is generating 6 random words using a tool like Dice going to be a little bit of a pain? Yeah. It's going to be easy to type? Yes. Are you going to remember it after you use it? Yes, even. So that's a decision you're going to need to make. What is the right fit for me? I've got a small office, locked down. Anything cloud-based is a and no for policy, and I'm not going to make it a firewall. For us, we went with KeyPass. The KeyPass was doing. I wanted to cryptographically would meet our needs. That's just a part of the golden image. For a different organization in a different situation, maybe KeyPass is the wrong tool. You need to evaluate it. What I'm suggesting to you, to all of you, is having the password vault, right one for you, better than not having it. No longer having people passwords, having the plain files, no longer having that spreadsheet. But which vault is the right for you and your organization depends on you and your organization. The right one for me may not be the right one. Question? Somewhere? Looking for identical things. Absolutely. Same thing for Bitcoin mining is exactly what it is. Environments, mining software is one of the things that there's a lot of things that have changed password cracking popularity because we're now getting down to the point where we have a strong understanding of what it takes strong caveat. In a theoretically perfect universe where your multi-factor covers every, maybe not. I'm very surprised if a very high quality multi-factor implementation actually does everything. Very famously, like, there are two different ways to talk about Exchange. One of them enforces multi-factor, one doesn't. How Exchange internet just step up one port to the side and multi-factor no. So if I had MFA deployed, I would be very, very interested in validating it, trying to push the limit, failure point, find where it stops covering. And if place that it relax it a little. For 9 minutes. I have actually settled on, I'm very, very comfortable. I would use. So this laptop is one. I don't have it set up laptop right now with plug this in, always be like but I normally set it up with a filing window manager. In the bottom bar, I still have a menu. Have any on-topic questions? Still going to be really expensive. So nothing in security is yes or no. Everything in security is how bad do they want me? Because if somebody wants to hack you, there exists out there somebody who has the O days sitting around in their arsenal, get into your org and take one from you. Not going to do that because that O day is worth way more to them than your. Same thing applies here. It's not about can they do it or can't they, it's have I pushed up the level of difficulty? Is the difficulty bar to the point where some attackers, ones that aren't, have I slowed them down? If you're a big org and you have, like, actually want to be, you want to live kind of like at a 5 out of 5 maturity level, that's going to be a lot of money for you, but it also means it would be a massive amount of money for an attacker too. Smaller organization, you may not want to live at a 5 out of 5. You may want your malware well, slowing down for targeted stuff. Place here. Somebody wants to crack that password, they can. They can some amount of money. They literally exhaust all of the GPU. Amazon actually has you pumping more money into it. But are they going to spend that much on you? What? And the answer to that question of are they going to spend that much on you? But where do I want my org to live? Security in terms of auditing, password policy. I do believe in my organization have people really come after me and cracking my password. Okay, well then you might need to look into. Okay, I'm looking into password or my cracking rate or use AWS. Maturity should match how hard they're going to come after you. On top of questions? Then I'm going to let you go. I will be here to talk to you about off-topic things.